Who's wrong and who's wronger? In this corner, followed by millions, James the Exploding Unicorn Breakwell. And in that corner, ignored by millions, Steve Dash Rinko Levers.
Wrong and Wronger, and thank God we're all here because it came very close to you just suffering through James Breakwell solo. I am here to salve the wound and bridge the gap. I'm Steve Olivas, Dr. Steve, and he's James the Exploding Unicorn Breakwell. And James, brother, how are you doing today?
I was so close to not having to do this podcast today. You dangled freedom in front of me, and then at the last possible second, snatched it away. That's how I'm doing.
Well, you can blame Mrs. Steve for rescuing me from my own freneticism, as she was able to locate the home phone, which I lost, apparently on my dresser. It's weird.
Were you the one who used it last?
In fairness, I was not the one who used it last. So that's why I always put it back on the cradle after we're done recording.
I am actually intrigued because I don't have to worry about losing my home phone because like 99.9% of the world, I don't have a home phone. But a second ago, as you were frantically looking for this, you revealed that the only reason you have a home phone is for me, which I guess is a great reason to do anything. So let's talk about that today. What should you have a home phone or not?
Ooh, should you have a landline? And I guess you and I are on different sides of the coin, the proverbial quarter of fate, the Guam quarter of fate, which used to be in this room, but Mrs. Steve has cleared out a lot of it so we can show the house because we're selling. And I don't know where it is. Oh, hold on.
Ooh, did you find it?
Oh my God. James, I have located the Guam quarter of fate, believe it or not. Wow. Back for a surprise appearance. But yeah, what made you not have a phone? Like, you have little kids. Don't you want a phone just in case, like, somebody needs to make a call and your cells aren't around?
I mean, when I first got my apartment back in 2007, I had a home phone. I barely had a cell phone at that time. But in all the years after that, the only people who ever called that phone were telemarketers. I called 911 0 times from that phone and got called a million times from telemarketers. And I was paying money for it. I mean, some insignificant amount of money because I'm sure I had the cheapest possible plan. But it was pointless. And then we moved into this house and we just had our cell phones for forever because our kids were too young to dial 911. And then they got old enough that they could. And we ended up getting my oldest daughter her own cell phone. Now, maybe it would have been cheaper to get her a landline, but that would have come with the disadvantage that, it's a landline. It's in your house. She couldn't call us from practice if she needed to be picked up. She couldn't call us from grandma's house or her, her friends' houses. So it seemed pointless. I will say the flip side of that, though, is I no longer know any phone numbers. I know my phone number and I know my wife's phone number because it's only one digit different than mine. I don't know my daughter's phone number. I don't know your phone number. If your name didn't pop up when you called, I would have no idea who you were.
Is my name on the landline?
It's your wife's name, actually.
Oh, all right.
Unlike that other mystery name that was at your office, I've already forgotten it. The one that we got an entire episode out of, our greatest episode of all time. But you, who have no small children who need to call 911, still have a landline. What's up with that?
The reason we have a landline is a little different than I think most people's, because most people are far more safety conscious than we are. The reason we still have a landline is because we get such crappy cell reception at our house. And this is the second house in a row that was apparently built in a moon crater, and it is unreachable by most cell services. So we have a landline just in case we have an important phone call, and it's impossible to keep the signal.
So I guess, did you not research it beforehand to see who would actually cover you in that neighborhood? You just kind of wing it?
Yeah, it's like a Navy SEAL sat phone, I think was the only answer that was returned positive.
Yeah, There's it's kind of shocking that in 2021, like different providers still have different coverages, especially since they share towers so much. But I know there was one carrier that like nobody around here uses, and they're more expensive. But if you go back into certain parts of Iowa and you don't have that carrier, no one can reach you. It's like you're on the part of the map that says "Here be dragons." It's just nothing for like hundreds of miles, the deadest of dead zones. But over here, that carrier doesn't do much. So actually, for a while. We had the most infuriating dead zone in town. There was a dead zone that only covered the parking lot at my daughter's orthodontist. And I found out there's actually my cell carrier actually has a store not a block away. And I was in there one day and they said, yeah, so our area of town has 2 towers. And one of those towers got hit by lightning. And like the faster internet part of it got knocked out. And my phone won't switch from faster to slower internet. It just chooses either faster internet or no internet. It's kind of a prima donna. And now they won't let me come into the orthodontist appointment because whatever's been in the news for the last year. So I would go out there and sit. And I just had to be alone with my thoughts. I couldn't look up anything on the internet. I couldn't text. I couldn't call. There was a pizza place 50 feet from where I was. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to order pizza one of these days so I can get her food and then we'll go back to school. I could not order pizza within line of sight of the pizza place. That's how dead this dead zone was. So I guess I can sympathize. But that was a very localized dead zone. I mean, your sprawling manor is bigger than that parking lot. So I'm kind of surprised you don't have your own cell tower there.
That's like a tornado taking out your neighbor's garden shed, but sparing everything all around it. How weird is that?
Yeah, they finally got it fixed. I have internet there again, which is good because I was going to have to switch orthodontist. There was really, I can't sit there for 20 minutes once a month and not have internet. That's just absurd.
Well, that's why we're moving. We're like, this is bull crap. We got to have internet. So we're moving out in the country where there is no internet. But yeah. Wow. Well, when you're alone with your thoughts like that, James, do you often find your imagination drifting back to Dr. Steve?
I try to keep it as far from there as possible. You only show up in my worst nightmares, and I'm talking with a therapist as we speak to try to get rid of that. Not the therapist I'm actually literally speaking to right now. I mean it more metaphorically.
Sorry. Yeah.
Actually, it made me think. So, not a few minutes ago, I was texting with my aunt, who I just visited over the weekend for a wedding, and she has a wonderfully delightful neighbor. So I know that you are moving away partially to avoid neighbors and partially because you are the neighbor to be avoided. Well, she lives out in the country and not in a neighborhood. She just like saw a plot of land they liked and they went to the farmer and made an offer. It wasn't even up for sale. So they picked it's in their dream location. But there's somebody who lives, I don't know how to describe distance, a eighth of a mile or something, just a little bit around the corner. Yeah, they've got one person who touches their property and then like one property over from that. There's this little house and it's occupied by a crazy lady. And I know that's probably not a word you're supposed to use anymore, but it's also the only word that's accurate in this case. So first of all, they can't say for sure that she exists or is alive. They've only ever seen her husband in the 5 years they've lived in this house. And he's always talking about her and all the things she's worried about. Like when the county went through and laid down asphalt on the road, they were worried about the fumes. That was the one time she left the house in all these years. And nobody saw her leave, mind you, but they left the house and then wrapped their house in plastic so the asphalt fumes would not get in. They're terrified of all wireless signals. And, being out there kind of in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, they the only kind of internet they can get is wireless. Well, one of the wireless internet providers came through and they offered a deal and they said, hey, anybody who lets us put up one of these towers on their land will get free super fast internet for forever. So my aunt and uncle jumped at that, and as we speak, there are workers there building this wireless internet tower within, clear line of sight of this neighbor who is convinced that all this wireless stuff will kill him and his wife who don't exist. And so since this morning, this guy has already called my uncle at work and gone out and confronted the workers who are putting this up. Like it was either implied or explicitly stated that he might have to like lay in front of the trucks to stop them from going through. And it's just delightful because they're in Iowa, like a part where there's just no zoning. It's land of the free. Like there is no possible legal mechanism this person could use to stop this tower, other than throwing the biggest fit in the world, which he is absolutely going to do. So I guess
your uncle should have asked the workers to dress as aliens while they were putting up the tower.
Well, they're so extreme that they don't even want like the vibrations from lawnmowers getting close to their house. So there was a huge swath at this lady's house where it was not mowed, like 15 feet radiating out from the house. And one of the neighbors finally got so sick of it that they swooped in and started mowing most of it for them. So I mean, this is the extreme of the extreme. So now my aunt and uncle are going to have the fastest internet on the planet. It's going to be fully wireless, and they're going to have perpetual problems with that neighbor. But hey, wireless internet, that's what it's all worth. And for all of that, I don't think they have a landline either, which they will never need. They'll have the perfect Wi-Fi calling, and they won't even need that, I guess, because their neighbor will be like at their door talking to them face to face already.
Well, and the government will use the tower to steal the thoughts right from their head, so they won't even have to make the call.
That is true. And as much as we like to joke about that, it's kind of unnerving how much like online sales sites know about you. There was a time, and usually I'll pick it up, like I'll search for this or that, and like 3 days later on a device I didn't even use, it'll start showing me ads for that. But one time I mentioned like, man, our hand mixer broke. I could really use a new hand mixer. And like an hour later, I was getting ads for that on my phone, and I definitely never typed it in. So it's I know we joke, but also we have these we have these digital assistants on there that are supposed to listen to our voice on command. So they're definitely monitoring us regardless of what they're saying.
That just happened to us, too. It's interesting you say that because we had a conversation in the car about getting a pool. Mm-hmm. And I don't even know how to research pools on my phone. You just Google the word pool and then pool builders show up. Well, I guess all you have to do is have a conversation with your wife in the car about getting a pool, because then pool ads miraculously start showing up on different social media platforms. It is interesting and makes me wonder what my phone has all heard through the years.
And it makes you wonder, too. I mean, it makes sense because these digital assistants, they sit there waiting for your command so that when you say, hey, Google or hey, Alexa, they perk right up. But in order to perk right up, they have to be listening for their name. Like they have to be by their very nature. And we just overlook that. It's like, well, surely they're just listening for their name and they ignore every single other thing we say. It's like, I don't know about that. And yet...
And that's why you need the landline. Yeah. Drop the mic, boom, baby.
And even knowing all of that, we still have these devices in our house. Like it's just like I'm being spied on, but it's so convenient. Although, I mean, how long have these jokes about the FBI listening to us been around? I mean, there's always the present fear of people monitoring you on your landline too. It's just landline communication. It's so much lamer. If you're going to call somebody a landline, it's not like you walk around with your landline in your pocket. Like when that thing's monitoring you, you have to like deliberately decide to call somebody. And given, the way phone calls work now, the only person you're going to call is like your elderly grandmother, because nobody else communicates by phone call. And I mean, if it weren't for these calls for our podcast, I would use 0 minutes a month talking on the phone.
If I've learned anything from Hollywood and movies, it's two things. One, that we would hear a series of mysterious clicks on the phone if somebody were monitoring it. And number two, the phone is just a speaker. It goes both ways, and the FBI can like activate the speaker to listen in a room even when we're not talking on the phone.
I mean, and I'm sure that technology does exist. I mean, that's probably been around since the Cold War, but the ultimate defense against that is just being so boring that you're not worth monitoring. Like they could come and spy on me 24 hours a day, and what are they going to get that I'm not already putting out for free on social media and begging people to listen and watch? Like I'm trying to be monitored. I'm trying so hard, and it's not working. Uh-oh, my headset's about to die here. Let's see if we can make it through this podcast. If not, I might have to swap in the middle.
I thought I heard a series of strange clicks.
Yeah, you know what? They're listening to me, so I'm going to let you talk for 10 seconds while I swap headphones. Can you handle that responsibility?
As soon as James says, I'm going to have you talk for 10 seconds, he continues talking. So this pretty much in a micro. Boy, I am so discombobulated since not being able to find the phone earlier. I can't even find the words to put in the correct order. But that is, as a microcosm, a good shining example of how our relationship has worked for over 3 years of doing this podcast now. It might even be 4 years. God, James, you and I are still overdue for that divorce.
Oh, so overdue. Divorce / murder, suicide, whatever it is to get out of these kind of relationships. I think when this one ends, it's going to be one of those oxygen specials when co-hosts go bad, just somebody's body's turning up in a cornfield. But yeah, you just got to, jump in for things like that. It's kind of like, hey, I'm jumping out of this plane. You want to come? And by the time you give your answer, I'm already gone. So that the headset was dying. I had to jump out of there. And knowing how long-winded you could be, I was confident you could fill 15 seconds of airtime. And I'm going to assume you did so doing nothing but complimenting me.
Boy, it's those kind of assumptions you tell yourself that help you get through the day, James.
It really is. My unbridled optimism and totally unjustified faith in you.
Oh, jeez, you are nothing if not optimistic, James Bregwell.
Yes, I am. Which is why I have a cell phone and not a landline. Really,
what?
like,
wow,
yeah,
what kind
because
of segue is that? That doesn't even make sense.
Because I didn't think I'd have to call 911 that much because I wasn't worried about the risk. But if I do need to call 911, you can usually call 911 without even getting past the lock screen. You can just hit a button on the surface. And I know, like, if there's a mugger in the middle of the night, like, it's hard to find that house phone sometimes. Usually it's, it's tied to a jack and it's someplace inconvenient. But, if somebody breaks into my house, my wife and I both have fully charged cell phones right by our beds. My daughter has a cell phone by her bed. My other daughter has a Wi-Fi only cell phone. I mean, we have like 9 different points we can call 911 from. We can call it from our Google Assistant downstairs, which when it's not monitoring us and giving our whereabouts to the FBI could probably also save our lives. We could shoot an email to 911 from all the tablets in the house. Like that communication's getting through one way or another.
Yeah, but then they have to triangulate your position. And I don't know if you've ever tried to triangulate your position, James, but it's a lot easier to use the house phone and just have all your information pop up right there on the 911 screen.
And they really can do that. So I know a guy who's a 911 dispatcher, and they can do it, but they don't like to do it. It's a headache. Basically, you need to stay conscious long enough to give them their address, or there's going to be a long groan on the other end. And I'm not sure exactly what the process is, but it's not instantaneous. But they can use it to ping you pretty precisely. So if you're going to go out, and this is what still blows my mind, it's 2021, and people are still going out on crime sprees with phones in their pocket. I mean, and maybe it's a spur of the moment crime, I guess, but like if you think there's a better than average chance I'm going to commit a crime today, just leave that phone at home. Seriously.
Criminals tend to be an impulsive bunch just by nature, though.
Yeah, you know what else blows my mind about that, though? So, okay, well, they can pin down our exact locations by our phone. They know where we are at all times. We also have the highest definition cameras on our phones. Like, you can see every flaw on my face every time I click on one of these cameras. It's so...
Some are bigger than others.
Yeah,
but
it's so demoralizing. But yet, every time there's a robbery at a bank or a liquor store, it is the worst picture quality I have ever seen. Like, you look at this picture, like the guy's looking right at the camera. It's like, I have no idea who that is. I don't think that guy's mother would know who that is. I don't think that guy would know who he is. Like, did I rob that bank this morning? It's like, and your job is protecting money. Like, I protect nothing in this house. Nothing. And I have better cameras than you. What is going on here?
Yeah. Or the Ring doorbell. Like, but you get like the Gold Reserve, and they take cameras out of like a World War I bunker and stick them in front of the bank. Like they're inviting people to come in and impulsively rob the bank, which I'm sure happens all the time.
And you can get away with quite a few bank robberies in a row. One of the news stories, I don't remember if this is one that I covered or one that I read about after I left, but there was the people, they time it out. And I probably shouldn't say this. I'm going to end up teaching a bunch of people how to do bank robberies.
Because it's this easy. Okay.
It is. It really is. They would just time it out. They just go and rob random banks like way out in the country just because it didn't matter what kind of security the bank had, just because it takes the cops like 10 minutes to get there, which doesn't sound like
some Jesse James same stuff.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a ton of time, but like you can drive a long way in a random direction in 10 minutes.
Even on a horse, yeah.
Yeah, and like every time they got this guy on camera, and every time he got away because their cameras are all terrible. And here's another thing that blows my mind. So I grew up in Illinois where we just don't trust people at all. You know, we're rightfully suspicious of everybody.
Yeah.
So every bank, although it has a terrible camera, also has all of its tellers like in armored bunkers. Like everybody's behind 3 inches of bulletproof glass. Like you could roll in there with a tank and not hurt anybody. But over here in Indiana, which is full of good and trusting people, there's no bulletproof glass anywhere. I'm not convinced they know bullets exist. So the robberies were quite a bit easier. And this guy, he wasn't just Indiana. He went like through here, and he went down, I think, a little bit through the south. But he robbed like 50 banks before he got caught. And I guess I had a few questions for that. Like, one, like at what point do you cut it off? You're like, I got away with 50 robberies in a row. Maybe I shouldn't push it to 51. But also, like, how much money do you need? Like, you don't get super rich from robbing a bank, and the police would never tell me how much you actually make. But I think the implication was you get enough for a nice used car from one successful bank robbery. So 50 bank robberies is enough for 50 nice used cars. And
he
he's
had
still
a hankering
going.
for Toyota Tercels. Yes. I had a bank robber on my show. He robbed 2 banks, got caught both times.
He did not learn. Did he like was it Ocean's 12 style, like breaking into the vault, or did he just walk in and hand him a note?
It was, if you can imagine, there aren't many George Clooney-esque, like graduated from MIT bank robbers out there. Robert De Niro in Heat does not exist in real life. So my guy had just been released from the joint, and he was on a radio show that one of my Twitter people listened to and said, you got to get this guy on your show. And I got a hold of him, and he was on the show. And rocket science and him were not the best of friends, if you know what I'm saying. And I believe one of his robberies literally was an impulsive. He was walking by and went, well, I could either rob the liquor store or rob the bank. And I think this is literally his thought process. And there's more money in the bank, so I'm going to go that direction. And if I believe that one, he was arrested as he walked out of the bank, and with like a bag with a money sign on it or something. And the second one, I don't know, I can't remember the details of the second one, but he was caught very soon after robbing bank number 2.
Man, props to him for not learning lessons. If it didn't work one time, maybe you just didn't do it hard enough. But I think that's kind of par for the course. So the guy who got away with it until his 52nd try or whatever it was, I mean, again, he was too stupid to quit, so he's not a smart robber either.
Yeah, he had a couple of years in JUCO under his belt, but yeah.
But my favorite robbery was in the middle of nowhere too. But this one wasn't because they planned it out. It was in the middle of the nowhere because that's where the person lived. They went and they robbed their own bank, like where they were a customer in a small town where everybody knows everybody. When she got home, the police were waiting at her trailer. Like, how did you think this was gonna end?
Randy, is that you?
Oh.
He left his business card, too. He does a power washing company on the side, so I thought I'd drum up a little business.
And even, I'm surprised that bank robbers don't get caught more than they do. So even though, the bank cameras are terrible, since everybody has a cell phone and not a landline now, like in the middle of a bank robbery, I'm surprised that everybody doesn't just pull out their cameras and start live streaming it, taking pictures to post tweets and fleets and all of that.
Don't you watch movies? The first thing the robbers do is say, put your cell phones in the bag, and then they hand a pillowcase around and people put their cell phones in it.
I am confident that happens in 0% of robberies. I think honestly the reason people don't get taped is because usually it's very quiet. You just walk up and hand a note to the person, and then you end up getting caught anyway. Like, I don't know that anybody ever really gets away with any of these crimes, and like some of them are just so pointless. Like the penalties for robbing a liquor store or a gas station are so severe, and if the teller drops the money right, you're gonna get like $50. Like, what is 2 to 3 years in prison worth to you? Is it worth $50? It just
you really need a sandwich that night.
And even
one of those days.
Yeah, and maybe that's why they have such terrible cameras at gas stations and at banks, because they just know the criminals are so stupid that if they don't catch them on this one, they'll catch them on the next one, and it's just not worth spending the extra $50 to get a real camera up there.
Oh, I can't laugh at that one. I know a gas station employee who was robbed pretty bad, and it was ugly. So I can't yes Andy on that one.
Oh, actually, there was one bank robbery I covered. Again, my one eventful year at a newspaper where the person got like $3,000, and everybody's like, "Holy cow, that's incredible! Like that's the biggest gas station heist ever." And it was the biggest gas station heist ever because they knew the cashier, and it was an inside job. Like so the person just didn't drop any money into the safe, and then the robber like walked in, casually stepped up, the guy stepped back, and they just walked out with the money. And again,
they kissed on the way out. Yeah,
and I guess that terrible camera was enough to say you clearly were not under duress, and they put two and two together pretty quickly. So it's probably good for all of us that criminals are not smarter than what they are. So I guess whether you have a landline or a cell phone, you'll probably be okay because criminals are just not the brightest.
And it's a good thing that ferrets don't weigh 80 pounds, or we would be extinct.
Okay, fair enough.
This show has got to be extinct at least for a week before, like Lazarus, we are resurrected for the dead next week. From the dead, not for the dead. Actually, our show's probably more appealing to the dead than the living at this point, James. But I digress. Until we meet again, this is Steve Olivas, Dr. Steve, greedily hanging on to, clutching, if you will, my landline for James, the exploding landlineless unicorn, saying thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and as always, remember, two wrongs can't make a right.